Third-party controllers from Hyperkin. Do they suck? Let's find out. What is happening, guys? Todd here. Back in the 80s and 90s, if you went over to a friend's house to play some Nintendo or Sega and your buddy handed you a third-party controller, usually a fight would break out. Or at least that's how I remember it. No one wanted to use the crap QuickShot or ProPack controllers. They had terrible ergonomics and just didn't work very well. Well, today I'm taking a look at a couple third-party controllers from Hyperkin for the 16-bit Genesis and 8-bit Nintendo Entertainment System. First, let's take a look at the GN6 6-button Sega Genesis controller. This controller was designed to very closely mimic the original Sega 6-button controller. And unlike many cheap clone controllers, this one actually has the mode button on it to ensure compatibility with older 3-button games. It also has a 6-foot cable with a very nicely molded 9-pin connector at the end. Usually this is the part in the video where I compare the original controller to the third-party controller. However, I sadly do not have an original Sega Genesis 6-button controller on hand. But let's take the GN6 apart and have a look inside anyways. Open the controller by removing the 5 screws from the rear of the controller. One is hidden under a white sticker. You can then pull off the back cover and pull out the circuit board. The circuit board is pretty clean and fairly typical of these kind of controllers. One nice thing that it has exposed contacts on though to make pad hacking pretty easy. Looking at the rubber dome contacts, it's pretty interesting that the 6 buttons share a single rubber pad. However, this is the same as an original Sega 6-button controller, so it's no different. Also, the directional pad design pretty much mimics the way Sega builds their D-pads in the original controllers. It'd be interesting to see if you could swap parts in the controller since this pretty much looks to be a carbon copy of Sega's 6-button controller. Okay, so how does it feel when playing games? Overall, it's a very close clone to the original Sega 6-button controller. At first glance, besides the Hyperkin logo on it, it could easily be mistaken for an original controller. The smooth, contoured shape makes it a pleasure to hold for extended gaming sessions. The directional pad and buttons are a bit stiffer than I like, however, I imagine over time they'll soften up, so it's probably not an issue. Okay, let's move on to the Cadet controller. The Cadet is Hyperkin's 8-bit NES controller. The basic design is similar to an original NES controller, however there are several obvious differences. The top of the controller has these fins molded into it and the bottom corners of the face of the controller are angular, allowing for a bit more comfort when holding it. On the back side of the controller there are these round protrusions sticking out for extra grip and comfort. Also, the Cadet has a super generous cable length of 10 feet and a nice looking molded connector. Overall, this controller with its slightly rounded edges, slanted front face corners, and handrest in the back make it far more comfortable to hold in your hands than an original NES controller. Let's take a look inside the Cadet controller and compare it to an original NES controller. Flip it over and remove the 6 screws from the rear panel. One is hidden under the black Hyperkin sticker. Taking the back cover off, we get our first glance of the insides. Pulling the PCB, we can see a clean, modern design and it looks similar in shape to the original NES board. Comparing the Cadet board to an original NES PCB, we can see they are in fact exact same shape and basic layout. As a matter of fact, you can drop the Cadet PCB inside the NES shell and everything lines up and fits fine. Looking again at the D-pad and button rubber dome contacts, we can see more of the virtually exact same design. Even the directional pad itself is almost identical. Okay, let's talk about the important stuff. How does it feel when playing games? For this video, I'm testing the controller on my Japanese Nintendo AV Famicom. Its rounded edges make the controller comfortable to hold for hours on end. And unlike the original NES controller with its squared off shape, this one doesn't feel like it's cutting into your hands. This controller is every bit as responsive as the original controller. The D-pad feels pretty much identical as do the buttons. Plus the 10-foot long cable ensures that you can play from almost anywhere in the room. Both the GN6 and Cadet controllers retail for $12.99. They are also available in USB versions, and the Cadet even has an NES Classic version available. I've enjoyed the Cadet controller so much that I've modified one for use on an MSX or X68000 computer. Stay tuned for a future video on that. So I guess we need to answer the question I posed at the beginning of this video. Do these Hyperkin controllers suck? No, they do not. In fact, I might actually like the Cadet controller better than an original 8-bit Nintendo controller. It's more comfortable to hold in the hands, it has a wicked long cord on it, and every bit as responsive as the original controller. And it's cheap, dirt cheap. Also, it's easy to mod for use on other systems. With the GN6 controller, it has some slightly different feelings on it. Generally speaking, it feels virtually just like the original Sega controller, however, the directional pad and D-pad are a bit stiff and take some getting used to. However, as I mentioned earlier, with time I imagine those will soften up. Though I am curious why Hyperkin provided a 10-foot cable with the Cadet and only a 6-foot cable with the GN6. Well guys, I think that's a wrap for this video. As you can probably tell by the video, I'm extremely pleased with both these controllers, and I'd go as far as to say I would be happy to use either one of these over an original controller. If I went to a friend's house and they handed me a Hyperkin controller, I'd have absolutely no problem using it. If you enjoyed this content, please consider subscribing, give me a thumbs up, and don't forget to leave a comment down below. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on the Hyperkin controllers. Have you had a chance to use them, and what did you think of them? As always, thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.